Yeah, I think probably the number one thing that I hear from people is just keeping track of everything is kind of taxing. And so I think this is actually a really good start, kind of an 80-20 way to help people just know what sort of stuff they want to keep track of. Hey everybody, welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com. Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm Eric, checking in from Austin, Texas, and AJ and I today are going to talk a little bit about how to plan your trips start to finish using points, and we've got a pretty cool template to share with you guys that hopefully will help make it easier to keep everything organized. We've also got a lot of interesting news and updates from around the travel hacking world, and we're going to have show notes at abroaders.com/template. Good evening, AJ. How's it going, man?
Not too shabby, man. Good afternoon. How's Austin been treating you? I know that's become kind of a little bit of a hub for the digital nomads and the digital entrepreneurs.
Yeah, this is a really good community. If you're looking to meet interesting people, Austin, I mean, I think the city's got a little bit of everything. It's really nice weather. It doesn't get too cold. It is a place where a lot of businesses, a lot of startups have relocated. And actually, a mutual friend of ours, Jake, was telling me a little bit about some of the reason for that is actually in sort of the tax law that Texas is basically taking a hard line opposite approach to some of the laws that are most important to startups from Silicon Valley and obviously California law. And so this is kind of a cool alternative spot that a lot of businesses are locating to. And so not only are there like 30 plus DCers that live in Austin, but even outside of the Dynamite Circle, there's a lot of really good people. I actually just went to a brunch meetup that probably had about 25 or 30 entrepreneurs and just people that live in Austin that wanted to go out and connect with other good folks. So it's been a lot of fun. I've pretty much nonstop hanging out with good people and having really cool conversations. And so this is absolutely, I would say, probably one of the top cities in the U.S. that I would like to spend some significant time in.
Yeah, man, I've always had a really good time every time that I've been in Austin. And it's kind of nice too, where it's a little bit more accessible than, say, LA, New York, or Chicago. I know that the traffic can be a complete bitch, but it's not a huge city, which makes it a little bit easier to navigate and a little bit easier to connect with people, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And, I would say also that one of the things that has been really cool to me about Austin is there's a lot of good places to work. As far as like the cafe culture and this place is, certainly more expensive than, being in Asia or being, someplace where there's just like a dramatic difference in the cost of living. But it's also true that, I think you can be really productive here and you've got a lot of good options. This was actually the first Regis I've ever been to that was totally laid out like a co-working space. So I'm actually here with George, our CTO, and we're working on the app a little bit and just spending a little time hanging out before he continues on the rest of his trip around the US and I head to South America, to Brazil. And we did a couple of coffee shops and like had good, great environment and just lots of people, kind of interesting people watching and work. And then I went to the Regis and they, first of all, had like a total co-working space layout. It was not like the business lounge. It was like huge open floor plan and like dozens of like big tables where you can just set up shop and get to work. So really cool model for
that's
Regis
interesting
that they haven't done.
Because I know that Regis does do the co-working space in some offices, but I know it requires a different plan. Having business lounge access typically doesn't get you access to the co-working space, because I think the only one I've seen, it was a really poor man's version, was in Budapest. The Regis went to, they kind of had a little bit of a co-working space near You're
right, and they wouldn't let us in there. They had started shutting the door and locking it to the co-working area as soon as they figured out we were coming every day.
Yeah,
Yeah, this one was interesting because I called in advance to just make sure that they had at least had some pods, because some of the office setups are just like armchairs where you got to kind of work with your computer in your lap. And I asked if they had pods, and she said no. And I was like, oh, okay, well, do any of the other ones? And she goes, yeah, but we do have like a lot of space with like open tables, so you might like that better. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh,
And it
nice, man.
definitely didn't disappoint.
That's prime time. That's good stuff.
Yeah. All right. So we've got quite a bit of news and information stuff to go over before we get into the template that you built out for everybody. So let's talk some news and updates.
Yeah. So starting off, this first piece is really interesting. It's a really cool, unique promotion that Iceland Air is doing it. So it's what's called a stopover buddy. So when you're in Iceland, they'll actually hook you up with a free local tour guide. You can do things like heli skiing, mountain biking, foodie tours, or all sorts of stuff. And your local tour guide is actually an employee of Iceland Air. And if you fly with them, they will hook you up with essentially a tour guide. And they've got planned excursions you can pick from. And obviously it's not free. They're not going to tab it for you, but all you have to do is pay your own way. So it's actually essentially a free guide. You obviously have to pay for your skiing or the food tours or whatever you do. But I thought that was pretty interesting. That was a pretty unique marketing play. Really cool thing to do for the customers. And that is it's a limited time promotion, and that runs through, I believe, the end of April.
Okay, so any flight that stops in Iceland, that's sort of the deal, is like you can book a flight. Maybe let's say you're going from the US to Europe, and if you stop in Iceland, you can do this tour thing and do so on the way over. Is it the same thing if you're just doing a round trip to Iceland and back to wherever you came from?
So what I'm reading here is traveling between the US and Europe.
Okay.
So
that's interesting. So, I mean, totally great play in terms of like, there's lots of ways to get to Europe, obviously, that don't stop in Iceland, but that would make me consider it. I mean, if I were not coming from Brazil and had some extra time, that would be on my list. Is there any timeline on the promotion as far as you know? Is this like a new thing that they're just doing indefinitely?
It's going to end in the end of April. So there's a few more months of it.
Okay. And interesting as well, probably obviously a period of time where less people are going to Iceland. It's pretty far north, and so relatively cold. I've heard, that summer is a great time to visit there. And so it might be kind of a little bit of an extra nudge to maybe make a stop before it gets as warm as it's going to in the summer months.
Yeah, man. You've got some news on the City Thank You premiere, right?
Yeah, so we talked about this last week, and actually just kind of a quick update. We mentioned to everybody that we thought the City Thank You premiere was going to have the offer lower after a few days, and it seems to have gone down from 50 to 40,000 points. That's what Citibank's got on their website. But I guess we wanted to just let everybody know that there are some 50K links floating around out there. And it seems to be like targeted offers. We're not at the moment sending anybody 50K links just because we're not sure if you have to be targeted first. We're going to do a little bit of experimentation and kind of see what we find out with this. But if you're looking for that card, I mean, number one, there's other city cards like the American Platinum Select card that are still at 50K. The Prestige card is still at 50K, although it does have a high annual fee. So this might be a time to just wait on the Thank You premiere. But if you're really hell-bent on getting that card, keep in mind there's probably some targeted offers. You can check. We're going to put a link in the show notes for where you can check on the city website. And that hopefully will get some of you guys to find a 50K link that you're targeted for if that's a card you're looking to get signed up with.
Yeah, man. This next piece of news is something that I've not ran into until a couple days ago. So I was trying to do a live stream of CBS, and VPN didn't work. They blocked the VPN did not work, and I kind of looked up as to why, and it's something along the lines of a new technology, or at least what some websites are starting to use, that a VPN essentially isn't enough. They do something with the browser API, something technically that's a little bit different. And so I was determined to watch CBS, and I found a way to access websites even when VPN does not work. It's a pretty slick workaround. You have to be using, I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but the way that I found out how to do it is using Google Chrome, and you can use Google Chrome's developer tools, and then you can actually emulate geolocation coordinates. I can actually put together a screencast. I've already done it. So you can check the show notes for this. But this is really slick, and this is what allowed me to access a website that even multiple VPNs could not access. So that's definitely
interesting.
Yeah.
I was actually talking with Eamon about this as well. He's a friend and works for AppSumo, which is a pretty cool company for deals that are targeted towards entrepreneurs. So worth checking that out in itself. But he was talking about some of the VPN services have essentially the ISPs have figured out which IP addresses are theirs. And so that's part of the issue. You can always switch to even more, remote random locations in the US, but they basically eventually get a hold of what the IP address is that the VPNs are using and block those too.
Yeah. I know the problem with the CBS thing, it didn't have to do with an IP address because that wasn't what they were looking for. It was something a little bit more advanced where there's something with the browser. Because I know there's a really nice Google Chrome extension, Ola, and it uses different technology than the typical VPNs that you would download and run on your computer. It's actually in the browser, which is a little bit different. But it's crazy stuff. That's kind of a bummer. I don't really understand why the hell they're so hell-bent on blocking content in certain places. Like if somebody goes to the extent to get a VPN, I don't get it. If you have a subscription to Netflix and you want to access it from the US and you know that you can, fire up a VPN, I don't understand how that's really treading on them.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of content laws and rules about who gets paid and based on who's viewing from where. So I'm sure there's a lot of legal mess to deal with. And so it's unfortunate, but awesome that you found that workaround. And I imagine that probably helped you watch Michigan State kick the ever-living crap out of the Wolverines this week.
That is what I was so hell-bent on.
Tough. AJ and I are alums at opposite sides of the college basketball spectrum, and it's always tough. Always tough. Hasn't been going very well for Michigan these days lately.
Moving on to some things that we can actually both agree on liking. We got some listener feedback. This is really nice. This is from Kevin, and I'm going to go ahead and read it, even though it was addressed to you, Eric.
All right.
It is, Eric, just listened to your latest podcast with AJ. Found it super helpful. As someone who's location independent for work and loves to move about, it's great listening to your episodes. Good tip on when having to use the phone because the website wasn't working to let them know and try to get rid of that $35 booking fee. Looking at Azul for Brazil later this year and appreciate the great tips. Yeah, that's a good one. If you can't book on the website, let them know and see if you can get that phone booking fee waived.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin, for sending the feedback. And also, folks, if you do have feedback, we obviously love to read emails and hear from you guys. But even better, it would be great if you have something nice to say about the podcast, if you can post a review on iTunes. That's one of the biggest factors for whether Apple is going to show the Abroaders podcast and help new people discover us. So we definitely would really appreciate that as well if you're getting some value out of the show. Actually, one other piece of feedback that I got in person today that was kind of interesting. I was at a brunch meetup organized by one of the DC guys, and one of our Abroaders members, Derek, came by and was talking a little bit about some of the stuff. He's working on a travel hacking course and has just gotten a lot of benefit out of some of the resources we share. And one of the people at this meetup mentioned the negotiation calls. And for those of you that don't know, we have a bunch of annual fee negotiation calls that we recorded and just stripped out all of the hold time and all of the personal information. And so you can use those to sort of get a feel for how you can negotiate that annual fee and either get it waived or get the account sort of downgraded to a no-fee card. So if I can track it down, I'm going to try and link to some of those as well. But, I believe the guy's name was Will that shared that had helped him get his Amex Delta card turned into a fee-free Hilton card. So congrats to Will on that. And thanks for sharing that was helpful.
Nice, man. Recently there's been a lot of chatter about AA because of the devaluation coming in a little over a month, and we've got some good news right now. AA has a lot of availability in premium cabin space. We've got the U.S. to Hong Kong, U.S. to Sydney, Tokyo, Seoul, London, Madrid, and Frankfurt. And this is what, before and after summer is when it's open right now?
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, so first of all, there, if you follow any of the RSS feeds, you'll kind of get like a feel when somebody posts something on availability. It's something we keep track of a lot because we've got obviously a lot of bookings that we're doing for customers and also for our community. We try and share whenever we see that availability has substantially improved or, we think we've uncovered a trend. We share that with the Abroaders members. And this one seems to be basically through the beginning of June and then late August and onward. So perfect timing if you've got, sort of a location independent setup where you can spend some long-term, longer in Europe. But yeah, these round trips we're looking at, just business class availability across the board, like multiple days per week. And in a lot of cases, 2 seats on each flight. And that's pretty rare. The one that's a little bit more limited is actually Sydney and Hong Kong seem to have 1 seat available, especially in first class. But business has been open with a couple of seats. So if you're traveling together, now is definitely a time to take a look at those things. And, just really good to see because we want obviously everybody to use their American miles in the premium cabins before they go up in price on March 22nd. Next piece of news we've got is a couple of new routes. And this one I just wanted to kind of mention because, AJ, you recently went on one of the longest routes that's out there when you flew from Hong Kong to Newark.
Yeah.
And they just announced that the first place is going to go to Emirates when they launch their new Dubai to Auckland route. And that, to me, like for whatever reason, that literally sounds like it's on exactly opposite sides of the world.
Yeah, that's a massive route. Is that going to be one of their Dreamliners?
I don't know. I didn't read the whole article, so I'm not sure what aircraft are going to be operating on that route. But there's only a couple of aircraft in the world that are really rated to do the long haul, like the super long haul. I'm thinking that that's going to be close to a 17-hour flight. And I would imagine there's probably even some weight restrictions on that. I know that when aircraft fly super long haul, they have to carry the maximum amount of fuel, and so they have sort of a luggage and weight restriction. They can't carry as much cargo and some of the other stuff. So pretty interesting. And then two other new routes that have been announced. ANA announced a route from Tokyo to Mexico City, which is really helpful, hopefully for folks that don't have access to the United States, folks that don't have a visa. I know that's the case for some of my Brazilian friends, and it's just a huge pain because to go from South America to Europe or from South America to especially to Asia, a lot of times you're transiting in the U.S. And so this ANA flight from Tokyo to Mexico City is going to make it possible to skip the crappy customs experience in the U.S. and get through without a visa. I don't think Mexico City, or Mexico rather, has very many visa restrictions against too many countries. So that's kind of a cool route and a good way to use Star Alliance miles to potentially be able to get from South America or from Latin America rather to the Asian continent.
Yeah, man, take that for granted, not being able to connect in a place because of visa issues. It just seems ludicrous. Just Jesus, kill an ant with a cannonball one time.
Yes, absolutely. I would say, I mean, I don't understand why, maybe it's a fear that people are going to stay. I can't imagine that people are buying international flights are really the people that are most likely to just stay in the U.S. and not, it just doesn't seem to make logical sense. But, man, China's got like a 48-hour rule at least, or maybe 72, where you can stay a couple of days in transit.
Yep, I think somebody was flattering us in the U.S. when they made that rule. I mean, sure, there's some people that want to come to the U.S. I mean, there's some border issues, but Jesus, I mean, whatever. One last route before we move on from that is that United's just opened up a San Francisco to Singapore route. So another good opportunity. It's not totally clear to me when that route's going to happen, although I'm sure it's published. I just don't have it in front of me here. But that's another kind of interesting opportunity to use miles to get to Asia. Always love to see extra routes opening up. And to segue with that, Singapore. Now, the route I just mentioned is on United Airlines, so this is not really related to Singapore. Besides, that's the destination. But Singapore, the frequent flyer program,
also has a promo going on right now. Usually when you book on the Singapore website, you save 15% of the miles. It's just like automatically discounted when you go to book the ticket. So it's really nice. And unfortunately, there's no waiver for that. Like when you can't book with the website, then you can't get the discount. So if you have to call, you're going to not get the discount. But for a limited time, they're bumping that up to 30% off on economy flights. So if you book through the website, sometime between the 3rd and the 14th of February. So when this airs, you're going to have just a couple more days, and it's for travel between the 15th of February and the 26th of May. But big time discount, 30% off the award price. So if it's 30,000 miles, you're only going to pay 20,000 miles roughly. And so this is a really nice deal and definitely worth taking a look if you're going to be flying long haul with Singapore. Only real caveat with this one is that Singapore does have fuel surcharges. They're not obscene, but they do sometimes come out to $300 or so, maybe even a little bit more on some routes. So do the math, make sure you check the paid flights and see if it makes sense to pay miles, because sometimes you can find relatively cheap flights to buy and save those Singapore miles for maybe doing some premium cabin where the difference in paid ticket is quite a bit higher.
Yeah, man, good stuff. That is a nice little promotion. And in the spirit of saving on points and miles, let's get into the core content. So the inspiration for this core content has come from a bunch of conversations I've had lately with people that are new to points and miles or have even been kind of passively doing it for years. And there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect with the ultimate goal. You don't earn points just to earn points. You earn points to use points. And I see so many people that aren't earning points with the use in mind. So what I did is I built a travel hacking spreadsheet suite that is going to help keep everything together and keep the main goal in mind, which is earning points and using them for high value and getting a nice return on investment. And there's obviously a lot of elements that go into that. So let's get into kind of walking people through this spreadsheet and the different elements of travel hacking that people need to keep tabs on. And ultimately, it's nice to have something to organize this because over time, it does get a little bit more difficult with credit card tracking, annual fees, points coming in, points coming out.
Yeah, I think probably the number one thing that I hear from people is just keeping track of everything is kind of taxing. And so I think this is actually a really good start, kind of an 80-20 way to help people just know what sort of stuff they want to keep track of. And obviously, you're free to sort of reorganize the spreadsheet any way you like, but we're going to put a link in the show notes so you can download this template. And it's definitely a lot of the stuff that you've done here is stuff that I'm really looking forward to launching the Abroaders app and having some of these things be things that folks can do right on the website and have us keep track of everybody's info so that we can use what we learn from it to help everybody do better.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So we're going to be talking about travel plans, credit card tracking, points tracking, and redemption tracking. But the first tab in this suite of spreadsheets, there's 3 sheets. There's one for travel plans, one for credit card tracking, and one for redemption tracking. The first one is travel plans, and that is intentional because that's going to allow us to identify the points needed for the trips we want to take. And that is something that I think a lot of people miss out on doing. So the idea of the travel plans is to, in this spreadsheet, plug in all of your upcoming travel plans for, say, the next year or so, and spec out how many points you're going to need in each program and figure out if you have enough points to actually book that flight. And if not, then now you know what you got to do. Now you know which points to target, and that's going to lead you into, your own credit card recommendations or where to put your spending.
Okay. All right. So basically, if you've got a couple of trips coming up, there is a little bit of overlap. And this is kind of nice as well because there's not always, like we've said many, many times, there's not always availability for every flight on the dates that you need to travel. And so sometimes even if you have enough points in one currency, you might need to have enough in a couple of currencies depending on how flexible your travel dates are. So I think this is kind of a nice setup where you can just take a look at it, plug in the values of, sort of what your target miles are for that trip in each of the currencies that you collect. And then when it's time to actually book, number one, you've got a reference to make sure you know sort of this is the minimum price it should cost. And if I'm seeing a higher mileage price, it's probably not a saver award. Maybe the airline, the frequent flyer program is trying to see if I will overpay when I don't need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So the format of the spreadsheet that you guys will see when you find the link is your date, your departure, your destination. So the example we've got here is Chicago to Barcelona, and we've got American Airlines, Air France, United, and Delta spec'd out how many points you're going to need. So it's 30K, 25K, 30K, 37.5. And then we've got the program, and then enough points, yes or no. And that is how you're going to kind of identify what you need to go after in the form of a credit card recommendation or some targeted spending on a particular card that earns you the right type of points.
And one thing to keep in mind, too, if you're just sort of internalizing these numbers, is this is set up sort of for your trip. So this is kind of taking a look at what the price would be roughly on the date range. Delta is a really good example of an airline and a program, rather, that has very good price discrimination in a way that's very bad for travel hackers. They're very good at asking you to pay more than you necessarily need to if you expand your dates. So that 37.5 could have been 30 a week before, could be 50 a couple of days later. So just be aware that some of these are more consistent. Like American just has Saver, and Saver's always the same, and then Anytime is generally quite a bit more expensive, whereas Delta, you can see it move by 5,000 at a time and just onwards, upwards until they can't get anybody else to book it. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and this is a nice format where you can just sort of see, okay, these are the dates I can travel, you've got the prices listed out, and you can sort of make a judgment about what the best program is going to be for your next trip.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So now that we've established we're kind of reverse engineering these flights, figuring out where we want to go, figuring out how many points we need, most likely that is going to take you into targeting some credit card offers and getting some sign-up bonuses. Now, it's kind of easy the first time you do a round of applications and you've got a bunch of cards available, but over time, as there's fewer credit card bonuses that you can really go after, and also after time, once the annual fees start to add up, it's really important to keep tabs on things. So the idea of this spreadsheet is to kind of give you a basic idea of where you're at on your credit cards, making sure you're keeping tabs on annual fees, and also things like the minimum spend deadline. So the format of this spreadsheet is your credit card name, the bank, whether it's personal or business, so you don't confuse those. You're going to want to toss in the date it's approved, the bonus miles just to kind of track your ROI, minimum spend, and then obviously the important dates, which is the minimum spend deadline, which I would recommend you set a calendar reminder for, and the same thing as the annual fee date, because that is something you're going to want to get out ahead of and negotiate. If you just neglect annual fees and you do a couple years of credit card churning, those annual fees are really going to cut into your ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing to be aware of, too, it's great that you want to have a calendar reminder. You want to stay on top of those. But if you see the annual fee posts, all is not lost. In fact, most of the time, you have a better negotiation position when the fee is already posted. Most of these card companies give you between 30 and 60 days to dispute the annual fee and say you'd like to close the card, and they'll refund the whole fee. There's some situations where they kind of prorate if you go significantly past the annual fees statement, where they will give you some of the money, but not all. But bottom line, as long as you're paying attention to the transactions, which you should check from a fraud perspective anyways, if you see an annual fee, it's not the end of the world. You didn't miss the annual fee, and now you just have to pay it. Now is the perfect time to call, ask for a supervisor if you need to, let them know you're planning to close the account because of the annual fee, and see if there's anything they can do for you. So this spreadsheet is really just, so you've got them all sort of tracked, sort of outlined, so you can at any glance take a look and sort of see what ones are coming up and keep track of those accounts. The last resource that I think is really useful for when you have lots of cards, and at this point I have about 30 of them, so I am speaking from experience, is that you want to have a tracking mechanism to be able to see all your transactions, so you don't have to log in to Citi and then Barclays and then Amex and then Chase. So I use Mint.com. It's super easy and it's free, and you can just add the credentials that you use to log in with each of the banks. Mint's pretty damn secure, so I feel comfortable with them having my login and password for banking accounts. And the trade-off is huge because you log into one place and you can see all of the transactions. That makes it easy to catch those annual fees. It also makes it easy to catch if there's a charge on your card that's not where it should be.
Yeah, man, that's a really good tip there on Mint. So kind of progressing along, we've got our travel plans that kind of lets us know what we need to do, that lets us know how many points we have. We've got our credit card tracking to avoid annual fees cutting into our ROI. And also, it's nice over time just knowing which cards that you have, because you're not going to have them all in your wallet. And so when you go to apply for cards, maybe you will be reminded that you already have applied for one of those cards. So the next thing is points tracking. And there's absolutely no need for any of us to reinvent the wheel here. There's a great free tool that exists, and I know we've been banging this drum for a while, but awardwallet.com is pretty much the gold standard of points tracking as far as loyalty programs go.
Yep. And so AwardWallet has access to about 600 loyalty programs. Most of those are, sort of like they track everything from like the points that you probably get at your dry cleaner. So you really can you can cover all the important bases for sure with AwardWallet. One other quick thing to be aware of with AwardWallet is that the free version is really cool and lets you track all your programs, but it's definitely worth considering an upgrade and getting all of the expiration dates. You can do that relatively cheap through AwardWallet themselves, or if you want even more, you should sign up with the Abroaders membership, and we'll not only give you an upgrade to AwardWallet Plus where you can see your expiration dates and your historical balances, but also send you alerts about what's happening that affects the value of your points. So just for example, everybody got an email a couple weeks ago about the American devaluation, and we're kind of helping a bunch of our members through the process of using those points before the 22nd. So if you want to supercharge your points tracking, definitely check out the Abroaders membership.
And you can find that at abroaders.com/membership.
Good URL. Always thinking, AJ.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Now, the final thing I also think that we're going to talk about is redemption tracking. And I think this is a little bit overlooked with travel hackers. So it's obvious that if you do an okay job with travel hacking, you're going to spend less money on flights than if you just went to kayak every time you had to book a flight. But doing redemption tracking will really give you an idea of where you're at. And I think some people may be surprised. They may save more than they would imagine. They could see that this is a really high value activity or a high value thing that they're doing, and it could encourage you to take it even a step further. And maybe if you're somebody that just can't be bothered and your time is much more important than your money, maybe you realize that saving $9,000 last year wasn't worth it. Who knows? But the format of how we're going to track our redemptions that is going to ultimately give us an idea about how we're doing is pretty straightforward. You're just going to put in the itinerary, how many points you used, which type of points they were, the taxes and fees, and then you are going to plug in your retail cost. So that's essentially, had you happened to buy that flight, how much would have it cost? And then the spreadsheet's going to do a couple calculations for you, a very simple one where it calculates your raw savings. So we've got just a dummy one in here, an example where it's a one-way from Chicago to Barcelona on Air France for 25,000 points, $82 in taxes and fees with a retail cost of $725. So your raw savings are going to be $643 in this example. And then we've also got the cents per point metric, which is a really good way to check out the value of your redemption. And in this instant, it's 2.57, which is a solid redemption. It's a good redemption. It's not a great redemption, but for economy class, that would be considered a good redemption. And for anyone wondering how to get that calculation, it's just the retail cost minus the taxes and fees, and then you're going to divide that by the points used and multiply by 100.
Perfect. So basically what you're saying is just savings per point. And just having that number, it's really nice because it's apples to apples. Like if you know how much you saved per point, you can compare different redemptions with different points. And so if AJ were looking at that Barcelona trip and we went back to the planning that we talked about earlier in the show, he had that 25,000 point redemption on Air France, and he was also considering 37.5 on Delta. Now, there's some cases where the taxes and fees are a lot different too. And so the cents per point just takes everything into account and just boils it down to how much you're saving for each point that you're spending. And that's a really nice way to compare different opportunities with different programs. And I guess sort of the last thing is you just want to try and leave yourself whenever possible in a position to have enough points with each balance that you have left to book something productive, do some sort of trip that's on your upcoming list of travel aspirations that's going to leave you in the best spot to be able to get your trip after the one you just finished.
Yeah, absolutely. Maximizing your, if you've got, let's say, like you said, a few flights, getting the best redemption as far as saving the most money on that first flight. When the year's said and done and you've had your 3 flights, that may not have been the best decision. Like Eric said, sequencing is very important. If you really want to take this to the next level, you're not just thinking about the current flight you want to take. You're thinking about the flight after that. You're trying to think about how you're going to budget and allocate your points and have an understanding of your incoming points on future sign-up bonuses and spending. It's a little bit next level, but that's really how you can take multiple trips per year if you're not, spending a bunch of money or have, enormous expenses that you can put on a credit card.
Awesome, man. And so one thing I wanted to make sure everybody's aware of, this spreadsheet, this template is totally free. You can make a copy of it. So we've just set it up that it's available for you guys to look at. You can make a copy and start plugging in your own information. However, we would really, really appreciate as a thank you if you would share your redemptions with us. Let us know how they went. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a form, just a Google form. It's going to be really simple to fill out, but we're going to ask you guys for your origin, destination, number of points you spent, what you paid in taxes and fees, and what the cheapest retail price that you could find for that flight. And if you guys share them, there's also going to be a chance to share some notes. We'd love to hear back about how the booking experience went, any trouble you ran into, any resources that we shared that were helpful for you when you were booking. And we're going to start sharing those on the show because I think it's just really inspiring. I had 2 people today at this meetup I went to tell me about bookings that they made and like sort of things that they had learned on the podcast that helped. And so number one, we're going to collect this data anonymously. And we're going to use it to help you guys know what a good deal is and help you see kind of how everybody else is doing. So this is sort of like beta version of the Abroaders app. And if you wouldn't mind taking an extra 10 seconds to share the data you're putting into the spreadsheet with us, we'll share it with the podcast community, and we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, this could be really powerful data. That, like you said, is the beta of our app. In the future, when we do have the app and we have a fair amount of users, it's going to give us amazing insights that will ultimately benefit everybody.
Yeah, something very cool about having a community of people that are passionate about travel and passionate about spending less on travel is that the byproduct of all of that is a lot of really good information to share, and it just makes it a better process for everyone. So yeah, thanks in advance to everybody who is listening, and keep using those points, and let's get more people out and exploring the world.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I think that's all we've got for the core content. Show notes can be found at abroaders.com/template. And if you do happen to find the Abroaders podcast useful, please go ahead and leave a 5-star review for us on iTunes. This helps us get a little bit more exposure. We don't really actively market the podcast, so it's legends like y'all that help us make this podcast continue.
And man, there are a lot of legends out there. Thank you, all you guys, for being with us. It is an absolute pleasure to do this show every week, knowing that we just got tons of people out there that are crushing it with travel hacking. This week's International Jam is a very recent discovery. So anybody who's been listening for a while knows I am just a little bit into Brazilian music. And there's a pretty funny character in the Brazilian rap hip-hop scene named Rappin' Hood, which Brazilians would call him Rappin' Hoodie. And he's done a couple of remixes of like classic Brazilian songs. So Caetano Veloso is like an icon in Brazil. I forgive the comparison if this is not a good match in genre, but in terms of like legendary status, he's like an Eric Clapton in Brazil sort of scenario. And so Rappin' Hoodie did a remix of one of his more famous songs. The track is called Rap do Bom, and I hope you guys enjoy and hope you guys check out some more Brazilian music, because I don't know, you just don't have a heartbeat if it doesn't make you smile.
I agree, man. All right, safe travels, everybody.
All right, see you guys next week.
Em 11 de setembro, nenhum prédio abalado. Mundo sem guerra, muita paz na terra. Diferentes convivendo numa igual.
Hey, brothers, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Eric or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week.
Poder voltar no tempo que eu era menino, sem maldade, não percebia